Okay, it's time for the drinks trolley because I think we basically deserve it. Let's check in with our pub landlord. That'll be Sister Susie. What have we taken there from the trolley?
Well, I've done it. I've gone early. I'm going for a mulled wine. Nice and warming because the temperature's gone down. And it's not just for Christmas. You can have it whenever. It's very tasty.
A mulled wine is not just for Christmas. It's for life.
It's so true.
Okay. Mulled wine is being served.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. So today's... I'm in two minds as to whether it's a 12 certificate or a 15.
Sounds promising. Dear. I like it already.
It's sort of memorable.
I'll bet.
In a kind of a...
Oh. Right.
Anyway, it comes from, let's say her name is Becca, to the Dream Confessions team. My confession dates back to 2004, where I was a second-year medical imaging student at a university, and I was on medical placement. It gets quite technical, but I think we get the flow. Okay. Midway through the second year, we embarked on the clinical placement, and as my fellow astute, soon-to-be colleagues, well, we'd been doing the job for ages. That's what we thought. We knew all the physics, we knew all the chemistry, all the radiation benefits and the risks to any medical imaging procedure that could ever be requested. We could reload the daylight processor of the X-ray machine and even develop films in the darkroom if we had to. And actually it was becoming annoying to us all that we were doing all our labour free for the trained professionals. I mean, this is...
Okay.
Sounds like whining medical students to me. It turns out, says Becca, cardiology turned out to be my speciality. For reasons I, and I'm sure no one else, especially the poor man involved in this story, we're going to call him Nigel, will ever comprehend. Me being such an accomplished student, very confidently upon the request of the cardiology ward for a portable chest x-ray, gathered the key to the mobile x-ray machine and along with my mentor, who was called Nick, headed up to the 5th floor of the hospital. After positively IDing the patient, always very useful.
Yeah, good.
The X-ray request card said 1/7 P/O CABG *SOB increased BP ? Hemothorax. I'm just saying that confidently.
You are.
Some medical people are going, oh yeah. Well, I can tell he's in trouble. Basically, one day post-op, where they put a graft around the really big important artery around his heart. The patient wasn't breathing very well. Was concerned about a bleed around the implantation site into the lungs. That's the situation that I'm facing.
Yes.
That's what we're dealing with.
Yep.
And that's what's known as 1/7 POCABG. But basically, a graft needed around a big important artery around the heart. Becca says layman's terms are pretty harsh to the non-medical professional, but just shedding a little bit of light in for your confession. The professional advice. Thank you very much. We're now sort of started our medical placement. I've literally taken what feels like thousands of x-rays using the portable machine. Realistically, my logbook counted, I think, 30 at this time. Constantly being assessed by my mentor. I told you he's called Nick. I confidently took the x-ray plate, carefully helped the patient sit forward and gently helped him lean back onto the hardboard behind his back. After expertly aiming the X-ray beam towards his chest in an antero-posteriorly position, position, you get that?
Yeah. Carry on.
Carefully limiting the unwanted radiation exposure, I look towards my mentor. You remember he's called Nick?
The mentor,
He gives me the nod. To protect anyone nearby, I called out, X-ray! And when I could confirm the area was clear, wearing my lead jacket, I stepped back quickly to distance myself from the beam of radiation, hand poised on the button. Upon turning around to the patient, sitting up in bed, one day post-heart surgery, I heard the most blood-curdling scream as I fell backwards into the X-ray machine, hand still poised on the button. My foot was trapped around something, and now all the alarms were going off. Nurses were running. The patient was now bent over in obvious agony. What on earth had happened? Matt's looking very worried. Looking at my mentor, he's called Nick. His eyes were as wide as saucers as he was looking down towards my feet. Father Simon, I had tripped on this poor cardiac patient's urinary catheter.
Oh, my goodness me.
Ouch.
What?
It had the mind of a boa constrictor wrapped itself around my foot, and as I stepped back to take the x-ray, it ripped the catheter straight out of Mr. Happy. It gets worse. When a catheter is inserted, there is a bubble of fluid injected after insertion of the catheter, just saline, but about the size of a marble. That normally, upon medical removal of a urinary catheter, would be removed before the catheter is taken out, but Nigel wasn't this fortunate. After a few damp towels, morphine, and a quick exit, I did hear Nigel say that Nigel made a full recovery from all the procedures involved during his day.
Okay.
So everyone is fine.
Everyone's fine.
Everyone's fine.
There are no more words that can justify my actions other than I have devoted over 20 years, my medical profession, to this cause and have guided many amazing students, and thankfully there was only one Nigel. I seek absolution, but I'm a realist, and so begging for some form of forgiveness, yours awaiting anything that comes my way. I can't even say my name, even though it's in my email. Okay. That is very true.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Becca, you're going to get a smart speaker. Whether you get any forgiveness, I mean, there are an awful lot of people that just went... a bit of leg crossing going on there, sense of shared pain. What do you say, Suze?
Yeah, I feel for Becca here, and I feel for Nigel. I felt a bit sick in that, just the idea of it. But you know what? It only happened once, and you know, women have to go through worse. So
Do get over it, Nigel. It's only the once.
Forgive her.
Stop making a fuss.
So you're going to forgive?
I am, yes.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, the size of a marble. Goodness me! Yes, we were all crossing our legs. I'm going to forgive.
Are you?
Just 'cause it was very funny, and you know, I mean, she couldn't control the boa constrictor of the catheter wrapping itself around her legs, and you know, it only happened the once, so that's
She
fine.
was a student.
And she was a student, so we're all learning.
Being exploited by the medical
She'd
of
done
Big Pharma.
doing so many of them, wasn't she? So forgiven, she's not done it again. So we've all learnt a lesson, laughing and learning as we go.
Is that right?
So for that reason, going to forgive.
Okay. Becca needs some forgiveness. Does she get it from you? That's the question. Can you send the people's verdict, please? 61054. First word is Simon. 61054. First word is Simon for the people's verdict. Before the news, you heard a confession from Becca, who was on her medical placement in 2004. She lives abroad now, by the way.
Oh, does she?
Yes.
Oh, right. Nice.
A terrifying story about how she was doing a chest x-ray and she tripped on a patient's urinary catheter, pulling it from its customary position with the appropriate amount of screaming.
Yeah.
Okay, the people's verdict is in. What do we get?
Forgiven, says Kim. As a fellow radiographer, I've also done this, and Becca should be forgiven. Nige says not forgiven. My full bag at the end of my catheter fell off the side of my hospital bed when my sister-in-law rolled over it in her visiting chair.
Oh, nice.
Poor Nigel is all I can say.
Yes.
And Bryony, a fellow medical professional, says forgiven. Catheter bags and tubes should not have been stored in a way that has allowed anyone to step on or into them. Not her fault.
Whose fault is it then?
It'd have been the person who was storing the catheter thing.
That's the one.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for the verdicts, and thank you for the confessions. If you have one, we would love to see it, please. And if we use it, you get a smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's 5:45. This is Greatest Hits Radio. It's time to bring hither the drinks trolley, because some refreshment would be very good. But what are you selecting for us today, Suze, from the pub?
I've selected 3 brambles.
3 brambles.
Yes, so it's a cocktail: gin, lemon juice, sugar syrup, some crushed ice, and then a creme de mure or a blackberry liqueur, and it fades through the colours and it looks very pretty as well.
Sounds a little potent, I would say, for a Tuesday before 6.
Tasty.
Okay,
Very nice.
Very good. All right, well, I'll keep that one to one side once
Okay.
I've had my bitter lemon.
I still
which
melt,
one?
but-
Okay, well, I'll cope with the disappointment. Today's confession comes from Tufty. Thank you, Tufty. This is an epic tale. We're going back a long way. Tufty says, Simon, Matt, Susie, the team. This confession goes back to 1956.
Wow.
Wowza.
When I was a 13-year-old schoolboy looking for a direction in life and a girlfriend. The place is the Gordon Mixed Secondary Modern School in Eltham, South East London.
Okay.
It's very specific, but I'm imagining that, we've all moved on.
Okay, let's hope so. Yeah.
The time, a music lesson with 2 classes in one room. That's 60 pupils, 13-year-olds. We've got 30 girls, we have 30 boys. The music teacher, a scruffy bloke in a creased blue suit with trousers 2 inches off his shoes, who thought he was Liberace and that all the girls in the class loved him.
I love it.
Okay. A little period piece there.
Yeah, I like it.
In his 1956 wisdom, he thought that putting boy, girl around a packed classroom would be a good idea to stop the boys messing around. The boys thought this was a great idea. The girls, not so much. Anyway, after the class was assembled, the teacher's monitors, informed him that the class was ready, and he bounded in, up to his pride and joy, the old upright piano, flicked up his imaginary tails, sat on his chair and banged out a classical music composition that all the class thought was dreadful. We all had to endure it for at least 5 minutes. Seemed to go on forever. But the yearly school concert was looming, and we were all learning a new song, Non Nobis Domine, I seem to recall it was named. None of us secondary modern school kids had any idea what it meant. We were into Johnny Ray, Guy Mitchell, and of course the emerging hot-rocking Bill Haley and the Comets.
Of course.
That's where we are. So there we are, all singing at the top of our voices, a song that none of us knew the words to, but it was Latin. Anyway, hang on, wait a minute, some fool is singing out of tune, heaven forbid. So out he came, no thumping on his piano now, listening to each voice as he passed up and down the line until he stopped in front of me. Yes, it was me that was singing out of tune. Now, this is a little period sequence here. Mm-hmm. He slapped me around the head and told me to get out to the front.
Okay, different times.
Yeah. Red with anger. Some miserable little boy would spoil the whole thing, and he made me sing the song solo in front of all those girls. The boys I could deal with, but how was I going to get a girlfriend now? I was mortified. Then a thought of revenge sprung to mind. It so happened that my musical mother had a piano in our front room, and much to my father's amusement, I had already turned it into a honky-tonk piano by sticking drawing pins into the hammers, and it sounded great. That's not a football reference, this is a piano reference. That's all you need to do.
Wow.
Very good.
So I made the decision, and I brought a box of drawing pins from Woolies, and while this is a couple of outdated references, and while the school was preoccupied with food at lunchtime, I sneaked into the music room, pulled down the front of his upright piano and pushed a drawing pin into each hammer. The dirty deed was done. No one else knew. All I had to do was to wait for the usual grand entrance by you-know-who. Crikey, I was nervous and I nearly blacked out a couple of times, but my revenge was ready and my hand had been true. The class assembled, and in he flounced, flicked up his stupid imaginary tails, sat in his stupid chair, didn't even have a proper piano stool, lifted the lid and hit the stupid keys. Clink, 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 plonk, 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 and the kids started giggling. He yanked down the front of his pride and joy and immediately saw the drawing pins. Blimey, I thought he's going to call the police or have a heart attack or something. He exploded, screaming, "Who did this? Who did this?" The teacher from the class next door came in because he heard all the shouting. I'm sure I saw a smile come over his face. And guess what? No one owned up, because in 1956, no one owned up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
After a very long silence with him pacing up and down in front of the class, the decision was made, again, different times. Every boy was to get the slipper, and every girl got 50 lines. A little unfair. At our Saturday morning rugby game a few weeks later, the PE teacher, who, looking back, probably wasn't much older than me, with a big grin on his face, said, "Tufty, was that you with the drawing pins?" Actually, it's a secondary modern school. Yeah. Maybe it was true. "No, sir," I replied. "I've no idea how they guessed, but he did work out somehow that was me." And to be honest, it was the best laugh the staff room had had for a long time. That's what he reckoned. The music teacher excluded, of course. However, here we are after all these years, and I need forgiveness from the 30 or so boys who got the slipper, 30 or so girls who got aching hands because they were writing out the lines. Could you please relieve me of 68 years of guilt?
68?
How about that? Sorry about the grammar, Simon. I'm an engineer, not a scribe, and I'm sure you can make it sound funny. Well,
yeah, we try.
I've let you down again, Tufty. Okay, well, it's a secondary modern school confession when things were different and times were rough in 1956.
They were, weren't they?
Hence the corporal punishment. Don't try any of that at home, kids.
No.
A pointless warning.
Well done,
what I mean to say is, if you've got drawing pins and a piano, don't put them together.
No.
Who needs a honky-tonk piano when you can probably just get it on your phone? So, Susie, what do you say?
Yeah, I feel for Tufty here. I don't think the music teacher was very nice, and nobody definitely deserved any of the punishment that was given there. But as you say, different times. However, I just think he should have just left it and just not. The teacher was a bit mean. He could have just gone away. Although he was embarrassed, he wasn't going to get a girlfriend. He should have just... I'm sure he would have been fine in a couple of years. It would have been fine. For that reason, I'm afraid I can't forget that poor piano that probably never sounded the same again.
It probably didn't. But I'm suspecting that Brother Matthew's going to be generous.
I am going to forgive. And here is what is this teacher on about with getting the monitors to settle the class before he deigns to come in? So he waits for the class to settle and then flounces it. He really does think he's Liberace, doesn't he? Clearly, well, he's been hoisted by his own petard here, hasn't he? With your drawing pins, making your honky-tonk piano. Who knew that was possible? And then he became an engineer, and it all makes sense. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
I suspect getting 60 secondary modern kids to sing Non Nobis Domine was always going to be a bit of an uphill task.
It's a classic. We all love it. Yeah.
Anyway, it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Tufty? 61054. First word is Simon. Just before the news, we had a confession from Tufty, a secondary modern confession from 1956 about a music lesson that didn't go very well and resulted in Tufty sticking drawing pins into the piano, much to the annoyance of Liberace, the piano teacher, who then, as I recall, got all the boys slippered and all the girls got lines, which seems to be slightly unfair. But anyway, the whole thing was unfair. The people's verdict is in. Here we go.
So John says, not forgiven. Maybe if he hadn't been thinking about getting a girlfriend, he would have been concentrating more and actually singing in tune in the first place. Emma in Bookham, not forgiven. Teaching 60 kids in one classroom sounds like an absolute nightmare. The teacher was trying his best and you ruined his piano. But Richard in Swansea says, forgiven. Sounds hilarious. Honky-tonk pianos sound fantastic. Would have been perfect for some Chaz and Dave if it wasn't the 1950s.
Oh, yes, that's also true. Your confession, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. Confession time. If you have one, don't forget, if you send it in to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk, you do get a smart speaker if we use it. And the brand new podcast, will be with you on Friday, of course. Here comes the drinks trolley, heavily laden with lots of wonderful things and wonderfulness indeed. What are you picking for us, Suze?
I've gone for halves today of Guinness.
Oh,
half of the black stuff.
Can I have the 0.0%?
It is very good. Yeah.
I've got some work to do.
It's very tasty.
It is, and you can barely taste the difference, to be honest. And the 0.0 will be fine. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And what an example we're setting, a moral example.
Aren't we, though? Yeah.
Today's confession comes from Chaz, who is not setting an example. Obviously, what with this being a confession. Chaz says, Father Simon and the revered members of the order, I need to make a confession. Not that I'm that sorry about it, to be perfectly honest, but it is time to fess up. In early 2019, my wife and I relocated back to the UK with 2 dogs. Unfortunately, our overseas vet made a mistake on the papers of one of the dogs, which meant that I had to leave my wife and one dog behind for 2 weeks, leaving me and the other dog returning by ourselves. We had nowhere to live and none of our family fancied playing host to us. So we had booked in a hotel nearby to where we hoped to purchase a house. The location is a tourist area. I'm not saying exactly where, as I still fear the repercussions. Unknown to us, when we booked to stay for a month, this particular hotel welcomes stag, hen, and general raucous party getaways at weekends. Not a good place to be.
Nobody wants that.
Correct. On the Saturday night in question, having spent a week house hunting, dealing with our incoming container arriving from overseas, sourcing a car and all the legal stuff that goes with it, as well as caring for a, let's say, lively 9-month-old puppy, I was thoroughly exhausted. After walking and feeding the dog and demolishing my takeaway fish and chips, I settled down with a well-deserved cold beer to watch TV in my room. Eventually, at around 11 p.m, as I started to doze, the in-house frivolities commenced. The rooms along my corridor were inhabited by partygoers who, having arrived back from a party time in town, decided it would be a great idea to continue the party in their rooms and in the corridor. They were running from room to room, doors slamming, shouting, playing thumping music with weird, I'm going to say, sweet smells coming from somewhere and underneath my door. This, I'm editing as I go along. This went on until 4 a.m. when they finally decided it was time to sleep. At 5:30 a.m, the dog, still jet-lagged, needed to go out for a pee, so I got up, showered, and took her out for a walk. It was on my way back to my room that I noticed that the door of the room next to mine was open, propped open by a very stylish black leather Gucci loafer. £230 each. The dog and I went down to breakfast. Not that you can buy them individually, obviously. The dog and I went down to breakfast, and my evil retribution plan started to take shape in my weary, tired, and oh-so revenge-hungry mind. This could go a number of ways, but anyway. I headed back to my room armed with a little polystyrene cup of baked beans from the excellent buffet breakfast. Upon reaching my room, I furtively plopped those delicious beans into that very expensive shoe, propping open the door of the room next door. I don't know exactly how many beans were put in the pot, but let's say it's more than 57, shall we? I retreated to my room and waited for discovery. About an hour later, the party residents surfaced, and once again the door slamming and hungover morning greetings started as my corridor neighbours began visiting each other's rooms again. It was checkout time, and the friends of my next door neighbour were telling him to hurry up. And it was at this point he must have retrieved his shoe from the door and hurriedly pushed his guilty foot into the slimy, cold, beanie mess, now inhabiting his posh and overpriced shoe. The expletives, which, Father Simon, I would not want to offend your ecclesiastical years, were, I have to say, unknown to me at the time. However, music to my South London boy ears, retribution achieved, except now my bean-fueled neighbour was accusing his mates of putting the beans in his shoe, and no matter how much they denied it, he just got angrier and more aggressive. I could feel the steam coming out of his ears. Apparently, he had athlete's foot and verrucas. Well, he could have trench foot as far as I was concerned. And finally, as they all left, I could hear my baked bean friend still muttering accusatory words to his totally innocent pals as he sloshed and limped and sloshed in his bean juice-soaked shoe all the way up the corridor, whilst I reclined on my bed in a smug satisfaction kind of way. My wife and I still drive past the aforementioned hostelry every day, and as we do, we share a wry smile in memory of my evil deed. Father Simon, I seek no forgiveness for my action. Well, maybe just a smidgen from my bean-shoed neighbours' friends who ended up shouldering all the blame. But frankly, they made such a racket at 4:30 in the morning that I don't care very much. Chaz sends in today's confession. I think most people are going to go fair enough, but Sister Susie has harsh standards to uphold.
Well, I do have harsh standards, Chaz, and I kind of I understand where he's coming from. People making noise is very annoying. We have a sign on the pub that it says, think of our neighbours as you're leaving the pub. Don't be too noisy, because, we have to, share it with other people, and you can't be too loud. But I just feel like, Chaz, you just didn't know what you were getting into, did you? And the feel of beans in between my toes really just makes me feel a bit sick. So for that reason alone, I can't forgive him.
Brother from another gutter.
Yes, I'm definitely going to forgive. Oh, stag and hen do's are the worst if you're not on the stag or hen do and having to share accommodation with them. Awful. Also, what's he doing? Propping open his door with his Gucci shoe. That makes no sense at all. You're not allowed to do that. Probably says something about that in the rules.
What was he expecting?
Yeah, exactly, yes, yeah. Well, exactly.
Yes.
What exactly was he expecting?
Yes.
Some kind of visit, I am going to surmise.
Room service.
Well, who knows?
An extra pillow at number 6.
Yeah. Yes. But it was the perfect crime, wasn't it? Because it ended up backfiring on the man with the shoe and on his mates. And using all those beans certainly makes him a Harrigo hero. So for that reason, I'm going to forget Harrigo hero.
Yes, I got it.
As in beans.
It wasn't worth repeating.
Definitely
61054 on the text, please. First word is Simon, forgiven or not. Just before the news, we had a confession from Chaz, a hotel, a noisy hen and stag do, riots in the corridor, and a Gucci shoe filled with baked beans. Interesting revenge. Unfortunately, the man who put his foot in the Gucci shoe had verrucas, an athlete's foot, and all that kind of jazz. So does Chaz get any kind of forgiveness? Let's see what the people's verdict has.
Well, we're all forgiving tonight. Ricky in Wadebridge says, forgiven. Noisy neighbours are the absolute worst. He was kept awake till 4 a.m.
Outrageous.
They were lucky it was just baked beans in the shoe and not something worse.
That's what I was thinking.
Grant in Paisley says, forgiven. We had the same people in a hotel in Spain. They were so awful and loud that when I went to breakfast, I turned all the do not disturb signs round to make my room. And Billy from Brentwood says, forgiven. Everyone loves beans on toes.
Oh, okay, that's not
Beans
bad.
on toes.
It was your delivery, obviously, which gave it its miraculous powers.
Brilliant.
Thank you for all the verdicts, and thank you for your confession. 2 confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And this is Greatest Hits Radio, and it's confession time. But first of all, a little bit of sustenance with the drinks trolley. As you can just hear Susie grab something there, quite tempting. What did you get hold of there?
I've got hold of 3 Lageritas.
A Lagerita? That doesn't sound like a very good idea.
So it's a margarita, but you add lager. So, you know, your normal tequila, Cointreau, lime juice, but maybe top it up with some Mexican lager. The Modelo Especiales is a tasty one.
Or you could just have a beer and then have something that's stronger.
Well, you could have them separate.
Yeah.
But where's the fun in that?
No fun in that, is there?
Well, if you started on a bitter lemon and anything is slightly stronger.
Anything is
okay,
possible.
thank you. The drinks trolley making a strong appearance today. Today's confession comes from Carl, and I would say this has probably got a 12 certificate.
Okay, that's good.
For general content.
Yes.
Oh, dear.
Father Simon, the ever-forgiving Brother Matthew, and the hopefully Sister of Mercy, Sister Susie. I seek your forgiveness for my sins, even though half this confession wasn't my fault.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Many of your listeners will be bemoaning the huge mobile phone roaming bills that their offspring might have run up over the summer holidays. It's an interesting thought. Back in the day, I remember child 1, £749.
Goodness me.
A phone bill.
Wow.
Now, I did a big one, but I didn't do that much.
Anyway, so I hope this confession will strike a chord with them and will generate some sympathy. The year is 1994. At that time, I was working for an internet company, travelling across Europe, having meetings to explain how this internet thingy would mean they wouldn't have to travel across Europe to have meetings ever again. This time I was speaking at a conference in Lisbon. And the company had pushed the boat out, and there were 6 of us manning a booth at the venue. Included in this 6 was our marketing rep. We'll call her Celine. This was her first time running a booth in a foreign country, and so she'd been given one of those most precious of things, a company mobile phone with overseas roaming. This, in the 90s, was a very big deal, and she was very proud of her phone and wanted to make sure everyone knew about it. She would ring anyone and everyone, usually going, "Yes, it's Celine, I'm on my mobile," at the beginning of every call, even if she was calling someone in the conference venue and she could easily just have walked over to speak to them. No, she used her phone. Well, Simon, something had to be done, and so I did. With a little trickery, we sent her an SMS message which said, "Warning, this phone has been infected with a virus. Please stop using it. Contact your IT department immediately." This, of course, caused an explosion. Carl, she says, "You know about technology. What's happened?" I said, poking randomly at the phone. It was a Nokia brick. "Did you get IT to install antivirus software before you connected to a foreign network?" No, says, "No one told me to do that. I need my phone now. Can you fix it?" "Sure. Cue me dismantling the phone, putting the SIM into my phone and randomly pushing buttons. There, I've copied the software from my phone, so you should be okay. But for safety, you might need to check to make sure you haven't given the virus to anyone else. Celine then spent the afternoon shamefacedly asking everyone in the conference if they'd caught the virus from her. Of course, being a telecoms conference, everyone twigged what had happened and, like me, simply randomly pushed some buttons on their phone and told her she hadn't given them the virus.
Wow.
When I get back, I'm going to give IT hell, she moaned over dinner that night. This moaning resulted in a swift kick in the shins from my wife, who'd come over to Lisbon to share the company paid-for hotel room.
Oh.
She obviously realised what I had done and was not happy. This now gets to the point where nothing is my fault.
Okay.
I, of course, dropped an email to IT to give them prior warning of an incoming hurricane. Hurricane Celine, to be precise. So on the Monday, they knew what to expect. Why did you give me a faulty phone? Can't you do your job properly? I had a wasted afternoon embarrassing myself and sorting out your mess, says Celine to IT. Tracy, our long-suffering IT assistant, took hold of the offending Nokia, repeated the button pushing. No, we'd installed the antivirus on the phone. Let's see what happened. More button pushing. I can see what happened. It's caught an STV. Did you use the phone to call any adult phone lines? What? Says Celine. Of course I haven't. Why would I do such a disgusting thing? Okay, did you lend your phone to anyone? Maybe they did. Well, yes, I did lend it to a few people because they didn't have company phones. You don't mean they... Ugh. Okay, well, what I need you to do is to have a chat to find out who made calls and what numbers they used to see if we could, and then we can clear off the STV properly. Celine then spent a very embarrassing Monday cornering everyone who she'd lent the phone to, saying, now look, without any judgment at all, did you use my phone for adult personal reasons?
Yeah.
Until a kindly intervention put her and everyone else out of their misery. So, Father Simon, the list of those for whom I need forgiveness is long. From the attendees of the conference who had to deal with Celine. From my wife who had to keep silent in the face of her husband's misdeeds. From Tracy, who dealt with Hurricane Celine with a plot twist worthy of only murders in the building. From the members of the team who had to have some very embarrassing conversations about STVs, even though they all knew no such virus existed. Particularly from Celine, who refused to speak to me for the next 2 years.
Oh.
Wow.
I hope that Brother Matthew will provide a degree of absolution, although I fear that the Sisters of Mercy will have no mercy. I would like to stress that no Nokias were harmed in the making of this prank. Well, it's an interesting internet and technical telephonic tale from the 90s, which still rings true to this day. Interesting phrases that I'd never heard before in there. But Sister Susie is going first. What do you say to Carl?
I really like this, Carl. It really, really made me laugh. Very clever. STV. I like it a lot. And she sounds a bit annoying, doesn't she, Celine? But was it her fault? Did you, and I know you say it wasn't your fault, but you started the ball rolling. So I feel like you could have been a bit nicer to her, even if she was highly annoying. But, I just don't think I can forgive you because you were being a bit mean, but very well done. Very funny.
Yes, I can actually hear Celine or someone like Celine saying, without any judgment at all, did you use my phone for adult personal reasons?
Indeed.
Adult personal reasons.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, I love this, and I'm definitely going to forgive. And Celine, it was very much a revenge of the IT people, wasn't it, this, for the way that she treated them, not very nice. And I loved it. And the fact that she has to go around asking if anyone's had nookie on the Nokia, I'm all for that. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, do you forgive Carl on the people's verdict, please? What do you say to Carl? 61054. The first word is Simon, forgiveness or no? Before the news, we had a confession from Carl about an overseas conference, a colleague called Celine who was clearly very loud and was overusing her phone. So she was tricked into thinking her phone had a particularly adult personal virus with hilarious consequences. Here comes the people's verdict.
Everyone's forgiving tonight. Andy in Manchester, forgiven. Having worked for 30 years in IT, Carl has put into action what all IT engineers think of doing on a daily basis. Carl in Suffolk, absolutely forgiven. This is the funniest confession I've heard in a long time. Good job I was parked, as I wouldn't have been able to drive properly through laughing so much. And finally, Matt says, forgiven for the line nookie on a Nokia. I love it.
I think that was your line.
It was my line.
Is that how that got included?
That is definitely how it gets
It's
in.
definitely the way to
Well
get
done.
your verdict read out. If you have a confession, please, you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. There'll be a brand new podcast landing tomorrow.